If you were to ask me, Dagny, what's the most soothing tea I can make with a low maintenance perennial, I would tell you that you need to grow a rose. Roses are so long-lived and they're so special that I actually planted my placenta after my son was born underneath a very specific type of rose, which I'll get to in a second. But as a gardener who primarily grows things that are annual, that don't live to see a second summer, planting a rose felt like a lot of pressure. It felt like something heavy. Like I needed to be really sure not only of where it was going, but what type of rose I wanted to grow. And in the meantime, roses are super medicinal, incredible plants that can be so soothing to have in any garden, but especially a tea garden. But there is a difference between roses that you would grow medicinally and ornamental roses. So we want to make sure that we're picking the right kinds. Modern, what we call tea roses, have been so selectively bred for their appearance and how well they last in a vase that they've basically lost all of the fragrant medicinal compounds that make them so special for growing for tea. And unfortunately, I still managed to make a beginner mistake with growing this particular rose in my garden. This is a true love rose, which was developed by the famous breeder Ping Lim, and he's known for creating varieties that are extremely disease resistant and more compact and easy to manage. And that was the big appeal for me for growing this true love rose. But it turns out, I didn't realize this, that this shrub rose, which is what we want to grow for tea, is actually pretty much fragrantless. I was sniffing the blooms the other day and I couldn't smell anything. I was like, what is going on? And that's when I finally looked it up and realized this. That just means I'll primarily use this particular plant for the rose hips, which is an entirely different harvest, which I'll explain as well. Now, I've nestled my true love rose in between all the other plants in my garden, and I think it just goes so well anywhere you put it because it is a shrub rose on the smaller side. This one will stay about 2 to 3 feet high and 2 to 3 feet wide, so it'll stay more compact, which is really what I wanted. Climbing roses are beautiful, but they're just not for me. When we're talking about roses for tea specifically, we want a shrub rose, and that's exactly what this true love rose is. It will thrive in zones 4 through 9. It has this beautiful dark green glossy foliage, continuous blooms that have this bright crimson color and velvety texture, and double blooms too. So they've got like 80 to 90 petals on each flower. So they just look really full and lush in like a classic rose that you'd have in your garden. Old garden roses and shrub roses are the most practical choice, especially if you're in a colder climate like I am here in zone 6B. They are the most cold tolerant. They're going to give you those continuous blooms throughout the entire summer. As far as culinary roses, classic one that is used for its fragrance and in baking is a damask rose. The damask rose typically blooms only once in the summer, but it is most known for its use in perfumes, rose water, and culinary purposes. When I first started looking into roses, of course, the name that kept coming up was David Austin, David Austin, David Austin this, David Austin that. And I was like, what the heck is going on with this guy? But it turns out that David Austin is just known for kind of splitting the difference and providing those flowers that are the most fragrant with the most continuous blooms. And there's some varieties that are known specifically for their fragrance. So if you're curious about that, the top 3 that I'd recommend are Gertrude Jekyll, Mr. Lincoln, or Wallerton Old Hall. As far as care and maintenance goes, shrub roses are a lot easier than your tea roses and your climbing roses. They like soil pH between 6.3, really good drainage. You can put in some compost when you first plant it, but you don't want a lot of nitrogen or it's going to force more foliage than blooms. All of your roses are going to prefer full sun, but the greatest part about shrub roses is we don't have to learn any complicated pruning techniques for a shrub rose. A shrub rose is pretty much going to maintain the shrub shape all on its own. So the only kind of pruning you need to do is if you've got any errant wild ones that you just want to clip off, any dead, diseased, disoriented branches that you're just not happy with. Other than that, you can pretty much just let it grow. There's 2 separate harvests when we're talking about a shrub rose. The first is the actual petals, the blooms, and you want to harvest those in about midsummer when the blooms are fully open, but before they're starting to shatter where the petals are falling off. You want the fragrance to be pretty strong if you're dealing with a rose that has a fragrance, because that's how you know that it's got the most of those medicinal compounds that you're looking for. And I always say to harvest things like this in mid to late morning before the sun has had a chance to really bake out those essential oils that make it smell so good, but after the dew has really lifted, because we don't want too much moisture on these since you cannot wash them before you dry them. As for the second harvest, this actually happens after your first or second frost. Once those rose hips start to form, you need those colder temps in order for the vitamin C content to be at those medicinal levels that we're looking for. So you wait until they're really on there and really cold, and then you can pop them off and harvest them. As far as the medicinal compounds, rose hips and rose petals have very different uses. So the rose petals are going to be a much more mild, more fragrant experience than anything else. They do have some medicinal compounds in them that have a mild soothing effect that can be anti-astringent, which is why they're so useful for skincare. But when we're talking about ingesting it in a tea specifically, the effects are a little bit more limited to just changing the color and adding a little bit of a nice flavor from the scent profile that you're getting. So it can be considered a little bit calming, a little bit anti-anxiety, but it's not going to be the one you reach for to solve either of those problems. Rose hips, on the other hand, are so high in vitamin C per gram. They're higher in vitamin C than an orange. They also contain lycopene, beta-carotene, and flavonoids that have been specifically studied for their anti-inflammatory effects. What's crazy about this is that multiple clinical trials have actually shown that rose hip powder had a significant meaningful improvement on pain and stiffness for people with osteoarthritis. Now let's talk about drying your petals and your rose hips to preserve them for later use. If you're not going to make a tea out of your fresh petals like we are about to do here, you want to make sure you're drying these in a cool, dark place on a mesh screen. They do dry pretty fast, in like 3 to 4 days. If you want to use a dehydrator, you can dry them at 95 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 to 4 hours. As for the rose hips, it's a little bit more complicated. Rose hips have these really irritating seeds inside with like hairs, so you have to cut the rose hips in half and scoop out all those irritating little hairs, and then you dry them. And because they're so much thicker, they take a much longer time to dry. They can take up to 2 weeks to dry on their own, or you can dry them at 105 degrees Fahrenheit in your dehydrator. That can take anywhere from 12 to 18 hours in the dehydrator, but you just want to make sure that there have no flex to them when they're done. They really kind of just crumble up under pressure. And it's kind of the same thing with the petals. You just want to make sure that they're really dry and crumbly before you store them. For my rose tea today, I had something different planned, but my container peaches are finally ready, and you guys have been asking me for an update on these, so I wanted to show you. They're doing great in these pots. So we're gonna celebrate that harvest by including a peach in our rose sun tea today. And then along with our peach, I'm gonna grab this perfect rose. Okay, we have everything we need. So to make a sun tea, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking for some people because of the potential for things to kind of ferment, I guess, for lack of a better word. So there's ways to do this safely. First of all, you don't have to steep it in the sun, although that gives you a nice, low, gentle warmth that the tea plants that we're using today really respond well to because they're more delicate petals. Or you can instead put it in your fridge overnight. The other thing that we want to do is make sure we're using very clean implements, keeping our ingredients very clean. And the third thing that we want to do is just make sure we're not steeping it longer than like 4 hours, because that's the timeline when things really do tend to start growing different bacteria. And I'm going to tell you right now, this whole peach is not making it into the sun tea. It looks too perfect not to eat a little bit first. This tree behind me is a peach tree that my mom planted so many years ago. I want to say 15, 20 years ago. And it's also producing so many beautiful peaches. These are just one of my favorite fruits. That's why I made my username the Cottage Peach. I can't get enough of these. They taste just like summer to me. Part of the appeal of sun tea, in my opinion, is using big, whole, chunky ingredients. It just makes it feel a little bit extra celebratory to me. But one single rose probably isn't going to give us the deep rosy color I would love for this to have. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to add just a couple of teaspoons roughly of hibiscus. And this will add some tartness and give it some really beautiful summery flavor, but it will also give me the color that I'm wanting. So I'm just going to fill this up and let it steep. The other rose that I planted isn't blooming yet. It's actually a briar rose for my son because his middle name is Briar. And I wanted something, like I said, that was just really long lasting and would stay in the garden long past the time when I'm even here. Most of what the garden has to teach us is about staying in the present moment and being here now and adjusting to what's happening here. And a rose is teaching us a very different lesson. You are planting a rose for a version of the future that you can't even really see yet. And it turns out I really needed that extra deeper connection to nature to think that far ahead into the future of how my garden is going to grow, to really feel connected to this space. Rose is just one of many plants that makes up a perfect tea garden. If you want to learn more about 24 other plants that I love to grow in my tea garden, you can grab my Grow a Garden Tea ebook from seed to cup right here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.